The big question, is a lithium or life PO4 battery a drop-in replacement for lead-acid battery? Hi folks, I'm Roger from Offgrid, and in this episode we're going to be discussing this whole issue of whether or not you can drop in a lithium iron phosphate battery as a direct replacement for your lead acids. When I say lead acids, I mean lead acid, AGM, gel, that sort of family of batteries. Now, the reason that this has cropped up, I guess, is because so many manufacturers of batteries, of lithium batteries, have stated that they are complete drop-in replacements, no change required to anything. And that has somewhat died down a little bit as the reality has sunk in, but there are still some unscrupulous manufacturers out there that still like to tell you that you can buy their battery and just simply drop it in, fit and forget, walk away, and everything works absolutely fine. And so we're going to be covering the truth or the reality of this. So basically, is it true or is it a lie? So let's dive in and have a look at that. To get to the answer, let's discuss the sort of standard average vehicle that you might have. So here we have a C-Class motorhome. Just chose C-Class because I have one, so I quite enjoy it. Here in this vehicle, this is our leisure battery, our lithium iron phosphate battery. Well, it used to be a lead acid. Now we've replaced it with a life PO4. Here is our starter battery with the engine over there. As we can see, there are three sources of charging for this this lithium battery. So let's cover each one in turn briefly, and then we'll deep dive into the ins and outs of each of these. So we start with shore power here on the left. So electric hookup, mains power, mains charger, grid power, whatever you want to call it. I think you get the gist of it. So you've got a cable going out to a post somewhere, probably 16 amp plug, a socket there, and you plug into it. And that comes through the 16 amp of your vehicle and then goes to probably your electro block to a mains charger that sits in your vehicle somewhere. And this then, when you're plugged in, will charge your battery at whatever voltage this is set to, sometimes multi-phases, which we'll cover shortly. So first source of charge, your electric hookup. Second would be your solar panels going through some sort of solar controller. That could be a PWM or a proper MPPT. So loads of different controllers, and that then charges your battery depending on how many panels you have, either fast or slowly. The last one, let's get to it here, would be the charging with your split charge relay. Now, the way that this works is that when the engine is actually running, there is a signal that comes to a relay. So this could be a sort of a standard 4-pin Bosch type relay. When the engine is running, the contacts are closed, and it basically bridges these two batteries. They act as if they are a single battery from the point of view of the alternator. The alternator just sees one battery, and it knows that the one, quote, battery is accepting charge, so it carries on charging them. So this is the most common arrangement on the vast majority of motorhomes and vans and things like that. We see it time and time again. But we're going to deep dive into the ins and outs of this. I just wanted to explain the basic layout of, if you like, your average van, average motorhome. And boats are very similar. They might have a separate alternator, which is quite common, but essentially it is quite a similar approach. So the quick answers to the question, if you have a smart alternator and you have currently no DC-DC or B2B charger, the answer is always no, and I'll dive into that later. But put simply, if you have a smart alternator, you absolutely have to have a DC-DC or a B2B charger if you're going the route of lithium. Right, if you don't have a smart alternator, and if your battery that you have bought is quite small, so let's say 100 amp hour, the answer is possibly yes. I'm going to cover a case actually just this last weekend where the answer was an actual no, even though the battery is 100 amp hour, and I'll explain the reasoning very shortly. Now, if the battery is bigger than, say, 230, from 230 amp hours onwards, the answer is probably no. And again, I'll cover that later on. But in reality, the answer is more complicated, and it depends, are you feeling lucky? So let's dive into it. And what we're going to do is, firstly, we're going to cover some general concepts. So being okay, it does not necessarily mean it is optimal. So just because it's not going to damage anything, it doesn't mean to say that you should leave it as it is. It could be that if you do make some changes, there could be a vast improvement that, aside from just covering the safety elements. There could be a massive performance increase if you do make certain changes. We need to just talk about the lithium iron phosphate BMS. So every lithium iron phosphate battery has a BMS built into it, and its primary function is to protect the cells. So it protects the cells from overcharging, from over discharging, and from accepting charge when the cells are either too cold, as in less than 0 degrees centigrade, or too hot, and that depends on the BMS, but usually about 60, 70 degrees is the cutoff for that. And that is just to protect everything. So the BMS is to protect the cells, protect the battery as a whole, and thereby protecting the vehicle that the battery sits in. Known of not too long ago, a thermal runaway on an AGM battery that actually burnt the vehicle down, and so this kind of thing happens. In actual fact, in my opinion, a lithium iron phosphate battery, because of the BMS, is somewhat safer than some of the old traditional batteries, because you don't get thermal runaway. Everything should shut down when it detects that there's too much heat buildup or something like that. Another concept we'd need to cover is the fact that when you upgrade to lithium iron phosphate, you are usually increasing your capacity, and quite often it is much bigger. So if you have, for example, 2 lead acid batteries, that would be the equivalent of 100 amp hour usable power usually. And if you're going to drop in a 300 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery, you are basically tripling your storage. So that would mean you're using all of the lithium iron phosphate battery, which you can if you want to. And as I said, you're tripling your storage. So would you need to consider the possibility that you're going to need to charge it faster than you used to? So you have the power, so you're staying off-grid for a bit longer, or you're using your inverter a bit more, using the power seen as you have it. Why not? Why are you going to spend all that money on a battery if you're not actually going to use it? So the idea there is that if you're going to have the power and you're going to use it, you may need to charge it faster than you used to charge your lead acid batteries, but doing it safely. The last concept is just the balance of investments. If you're going to spend money on a lithium iron phosphate battery, let's say you're upgrading to a single 300 amp hour battery or even a 280 amp hour battery, why would you not then complete the investment and actually get some decent charging going so that you can get the most out of it? It doesn't make sense to me that you'd spend this money on a lithium battery and then not go the extra mile and make sure that you get the optimal way of charging it, both to look after things, keep everything safe and sound, but also just to leverage your investment. Why would you not do that? That's the whole idea. Is so many people want to live somewhat off-grid, so they want to go 3 or 4 days without having to even think about hooking up somewhere and not worry about running out of power. That's a question we are asked so often. That's the second most common question we have. So let's talk about each of these charging systems in turn, and this will help you maybe decide what you're going to need to replace, if anything at all. So let's cover your mains charger now, or electric hookup, or shore power, whatever you want to call it. Again, using that concept, it is probably going to be okay to leave it as is, but not necessarily optimal. So most mains chargers are dumb chargers. They don't do intelligent things like desulfation phases and stuff like this. The vast majority of them don't do auto repair, and also the majority of them, even if you can't select lithium iron phosphate, you can at least select gel or AGM. So because they're fairly dumb, and if you can select the right voltage, they'll probably be okay to leave as is. Even better if they don't have float stages, because essentially you don't need that on lithium. So if they are just simply dumb chargers that just put out what they need to, that's probably okay. As I said, not optimal, but okay. And it certainly, you won't damage anything. So just because you've got a lithium battery in place, it doesn't mean that suddenly it's going to demand a lot more of the charger and burn it out or anything like that. It doesn't work that way. So the charger, if it is a sort of a 5 or a 10 amp, is going to carry on giving you 5 or 10 amps. 2 things that I think you should bear in mind here. Firstly, you may have incorrect voltages coming from your mains charger, and so you never get to a full state of charge in your battery. So for example, if your lithium iron phosphate is designed to be charged to 14.2 volts and into cutoff, which is very common. So the batteries we make, Fogstar, I think Roma, EcoTree, eco-worthy, all of those sort of batteries, they all work very similar in that they work to a voltage of around about 14.2. In theory, you can charge a lithium battery to about 14.6, but you will reduce its lifespan. So we've all kind of settled on 14.2, and that is the Victron standard, the Victron default for the LifePure4 profile. And so let's leave it at 14.2. So if your mains charger is not producing as much as 14.2, it may be that you will never get your battery fully charged, because it can never get to the point where the BMS cuts the charging process saying my cells are full, I can't accept anymore. And you're essentially doing the equivalent of flow charging almost over an indefinite period of time, which isn't good for the cells. You don't want to have long flow charge times on these cells. You should actually just bulk them up and then probably just leave them alone. So that's the first thing. You may not have the incorrect voltages and may never get to the full state of charge, but also you might have very high voltages coming off your mains charger. So let's say you select gel or an AGM at 14.7. That means that your BMS becomes the only line of defense, not the last line of defense. And that's not really a good thing. You want the BMS to be the last line of defense and for your other charging systems to be roughly the same voltage. I mean, the ideal really, because maybe not every single charger would be at 14.2. So even the Victron kit, which is phenomenally good, might be at 14.19, for example. And so you might just never get to the point where the BMS actually cuts the charge. So our preference is, if 14.2 is the amount that's coming out of your average charger, we like to set the cells of the battery to accept just a little bit less before it cuts off. But 14.3 might also be a good recommendation. I understand Fogstar recommend a 14.3 volt charger as the ideal for their 14.2 batteries. I think we'd agree 14.7 would start being quite high, and therefore your BMS becomes the only and the last line of defense. And that's not always a good thing. Would you change your mains charger? They're relatively inexpensive in the scheme of things. So a 15 amp charger is about 108 quid. And I think a 30 amp charger is about just under 160. And so consider if you're spending the money on that lithium battery, maybe you should go a little bit extra and look at changing your mains charger. Firstly, the voltage is exactly what it needs. Secondly, it's probably going to charge quite a lot faster than your current one, which is probably only a 10 amp charger, an average motorhome. And it's quite nice to be able to get onto that Bluetooth app. If you, for example, you're using the IP22 chargers from Victron, you can get onto the app and you can see exactly what the charger is doing. It's actually quite nice and really handy to configure it and set the voltages that you want coming from it, etc. So my recommendation, if you're going to take go to the trouble of the investment, then consider changing your mains charger, but probably not absolutely necessary. And to be honest, in the vast majority of cases where we give our customers the option, I'd say 75% of the time they say, no, just leave it. I don't mind if it doesn't ever charge fully. I don't mind if it takes a lot longer because it's a slower amperage or a lower amperage. I'm fine with that. And we think that's okay. So not too big a deal if you don't make a change to your mains charger. Let's cover your solar panels now. And again, usually a pretty dumb solar controller in the vast majority of cases. It doesn't do anything fancy. In fact, I've never known of something that does desulfation or anything like that. So you could probably leave your solar controller exactly as it is. Again, it might not charge to full capacity if the voltage is too low, but is that a big deal? Possibly not. Having said all of that, a Victron MPPT replacement is usually quite inexpensive in the scheme of things. Now, most motorhome dealers will, in order to tick the box of saying I'm selling you a motorhome with solar, will put a puny 100 watt panel on the top and call that solar. And so you've got a very small Victron MPPT or any form of solar controller, rather, not a Victron. So you've got just a cheap whatever it is. To change that with a Victron MPPT is around about the £50 mark, just over £50. So not an awful lot for that 75/10 controller that we replace a lot of controllers with. Even a 75/15, which would cope with like a 200 watt panel, is again relatively inexpensive in the scheme of things. It's less than £60. The only thing that you need to consider there is sometimes these really cheap controllers will trickle charge the starter battery while they're charging the leisure battery. Unfortunately, Victron MPPT controllers don't do that, so you may need to consider something like a battery master, which costs, I think, £70-ish to do that for you. Absolutely outstanding bit of kit and really good with a lithium leisure battery that needs to make sure that your lead acid starter battery is okay. So to sum it up, your solar controller is probably okay, but it's not that expensive to change it to a Victron, and you'd love being able to Bluetooth onto that to see what that's doing. It's quite nice seeing how the sun is doing. Right, we get finally to the split charge relay, so charging from your alternator. And again, just to reiterate, smart alternators do not work with lithium iron phosphate batteries. Let me explain that briefly. The idea is that your alternator is pretty much going to go to sleep, thereby helping with emissions, etc. That's why we have these Euro 6, etc. The modern alternators, being these what they call the smart alternators, are the dumbest things ever when it comes to the sort of leisure life. They might be fine for small vehicles, but I just can't see why we continue to install them into expensive motorhomes where you need as much power as you possibly can get. The problem with a smart alternator is that when it goes to sleep, if you're using a basic split charge relay and you have bridged your lithium battery with your lead acid starter battery, and the alternator is not producing anything, then basically your lithium is the highest voltage in the chain, and it will be used to run your vehicle. So as far as the vehicle is concerned, it doesn't need to do any charging because the lead acid is fine. It doesn't need anything. And so the alternator carries on sleeping, and basically you drain your lithium battery rather than charging it. You actually drain it to run the vehicle electrics. So that's the primary reason why smart alternators just do not work with a lithium and a split charge relay. You have to have something more intelligent than that. Right, let's say you don't have a smart alternator. Just as an aside, smart alternators, it doesn't matter what the lithium battery is. It could be 100 amp hour, 230, 200, 280, 300, 460, you name it. It doesn't matter what size it is, that simply won't work. So let's say you don't have a smart alternator. What are the other issues that you need to contend with then? Thin wiring, possibly getting too hot because the lithium battery can accept if you've got a 280 in there, it's going to accept a 200 amp charge. If you could give it a 200 amp charge, it'll say, thanks, I'll have all of that. In our tests where we have connected lithium batteries directly to alternators to see what they do, the amount of current flowing through would be uncomfortable if you have thin wires. So say you have formal wires, which in the old motorhomes were quite common, formal wire coming from the front to your habitation electrics, that would start being quite thin to carry that charge. 6 mil, probably okay. If it's less than formal, definitely not okay. So there is the possibility that the wiring just simply doesn't cope. Danger to electrics, primarily in the habitation area. You can burn your electrics out because that lithium can suck in whatever it can take, and that can burn things out. Danger to your alternator, if you're in a standstill traffic in Spain or Portugal on a really hot summer day, and it's pumping as much as it can, and your vehicle is just idling, so the alternator is not cooling itself, there can be the danger. So because it's drawing an uncontrolled amount, it could be the danger that you're drawing too much from your alternator. Anyway, you need to protect the alternator. Let's just cover the voltages. They're very seldom optimal that are coming from your alternator. Invariably, sometimes they're sort of in the 14.2 range that I mentioned before, and you're lucky. Very often they're not. They're too low. Sometimes they're too high. They're just never the optimal voltage that you'd be wanting to put into your lithium battery. So that's where you need a DC-DC charger. We pretty much when people upgrade to lithium, we discourage them from just dropping it in. Even if it's 100 amp hour, we do try and persuade everybody to at least invest in a DC-DC charger or a B2B charger if they don't already have one in the vehicle. And there are some vehicles that come with them as standard, like the short booster system and that sort of stuff is pretty good. But for the most part, we recommend that people at minimum, when they're going to drop that lithium iron phosphate battery in, also install a DC-DC, and at the same time they must disable the current split charge system. It doesn't make sense to have the DC-DC charger in place and then you're still going to have the split charge relay bridge the batteries. It's going to defeat the whole object and you might actually just cause problems with that. So in a nutshell then, I would say drop in your lithium iron phosphate, possibly leave the mains charger. It's okay, but not optimal. Leave your solar controller. It's okay, but not necessarily optimal. But I would definitely change that split charge, disable it, and install a B2B. And to do that, I would run a cable that is thick enough to carry the current that you want. So hopefully that will cover the answers to the question, is it a drop-in replacement? I think for the vast majority of time, you can't just drop it in and forget about it. You do need to basically factor in the investment that you're going to have the lithium iron phosphate, the B2B charger or the DC-DC charger, time to install it, and some consumables like relays and wires and cables and things like that. I nearly forgot to cover that issue of the 100 amp hour battery that I was telling you about earlier. So let's slip this in. We had a motorhome just recently. In fact, it was just yesterday that came in, and they had been sold a 100 amp hour battery, and the seller suggested they come over to us for a DC-DC charger install. One of the frustrations that they had was that, in their opinion, the vehicle was practically trickle charging the battery while they were driving. And they would have had this problem actually somewhat with the lead acid as well as the new lithium battery. And basically what happened was that the fridge was drawing about 15 amps while they were driving, and the battery was being a tiny 100 amp hour lithium battery, didn't draw that much power while it was being charged, and was actually being charged literally at about 20 watts, which is about 1.5-ish amps. And no wonder they call that a trickle charge. I'd say anything less than a 2 amp charge is a tiny trickle charge. And so they were quite frustrated that they had driven for a number of hours and the battery had hardly changed its state of charge. So in that particular case, even though everything was working, I'm sure that you would agree, a 20 watt or 1.5 amp charge can't really be classed as a decent charge. If you consider that if you totally flatten your 100 amp hour lithium battery and you want to charge at that rate of driving, imagine the number of hours that you're going to have to drive, something like 66 hours or something like that you're going to need to drive straight just to charge that thing. That's crazy. So there you have it. Even with everything that works, maybe you still need that DC-DC or B2B charger. So hopefully that clears that up. Hope you have a good day, and see you in the next episode. Cheers.